Hello and welcome to the Dad Strength Podcast. I am your host, Richie Leahy. Last week, we went ahead and talked about developmental charts, and so we're going to go ahead and jump right into that. This is going to be me moving forward with the podcast at a decent clip now, and talking more along the lines of what you should expect from your child at certain age points. So how I'm going to do this is we're going to look at developmental charts based on the age of your child, an infant. Now, these are typical charts, and I'm getting them from the CDC website. It's cdc.gov. So I'm not going to post these on the website. I've talked about it before. The reasoning behind that is I do not want them to update the site and then have the podcast site have outdated information on it. So I'm going to talk about these. These are a guideline. I'm recording this in 2016. So if you stumble upon this later, you may find different information out there. And today, for the first developmental chart podcast, we're going to talk about an infant, which is a newborn up to 2 months. So during this time, you're going to have the newborn at the hospital, and a newborn doesn't really do a lot. They run them around the hospital and do certain checks on them, like the vision test. I've talked about the hearing test before and my fears with that. They also do and this could be different for each hospital, but they also did an initial sort of allergy prick, I believe, and a blood test, so that they went through and made sure that they weren't getting any reactions from the breast milk as we were feeding her. And that might be different for each child, but that's pretty much it. The baby doesn't do much at this point at a newborn age. Once you get to that certain point where the child starts to get a little bit bulk to her, a little extra weight, you'll see that she can move around, rock back and forth, and make some sounds. So from this initial stage, you're going to jump from an infant that doesn't do very much to one that should be hitting certain milestones by the second month. So the way the developmental chart works is at the second month, or a little bit before the second month after the child was born, you want to start looking through the chart and checking off certain guidelines that the baby does. And it's grouped by categories. So at the 2-month age range, you're going to have 4 categories that the chart displays. The first one is social and emotional, and that is the verbal cues, some nonverbal cues as the child gets older, and some emotional stuff would be like crying response, and trying to get attachments to things. The second category would be language and communication, and that's where you're going to go ahead and get actual response from the child verbally or other means of communicating, whether it be sign language or anything like that. The next one, the third one, is cognitive, and that's learning, thinking, problem solving. Is your child able to look for certain items where they know? So like if you're going to be breastfeeding, does it know where it should latch to look for the milk? Things like that. Pretty basic stuff at this age. And the last one is movement and physical development. And like I said, at first, there's not going to be much movement when you have a newborn. So you want to go ahead and look and track these milestones at this second month to make sure that your child is starting to get some of the movement down. So we're going to go ahead and dig into the first category, social and emotional. And they're not really going to be able to communicate in a social way like you would think, where they can talk or make sounds in response to you talking to them. What you want is a connection between you and the infant. So the first thing that they look for is it able to recognize people, either by face, maybe by sounds. So if you come into the room, does the baby know that you're the parent? Is it going to smile? The smile is the response that they normally look for. Can you make the child have some emotional response whenever they see you. That's the first thing that you want to go ahead and keep track of as your baby nears the 2-month deadline. It's not really a deadline either, because that is just a standard gap of when most children meet these guidelines. The next sign under this category is calming themselves down. And with that, what that means is, can the baby handle crying alone? It's going to be very hard at night. I always went with letting them cry it out for a certain amount of time. And if you're going to do this, do your own research, because I don't know off the top of my head, and I don't have it here, but there were certain time frames where you could let a baby cry before it could be harmful to them. So basically, I would have a timer going on my phone that if she would start to cry and it went over the limit, I would go in and comfort her. But after a while, she was able to calm herself down, and that's one of these developmental steps. And it was very important for me to get her to reach that, because if she woke up in the middle of the night and was crying and she was able to sleep through the night, I would want her to be able to put herself back to sleep. I wouldn't want her to get in the habit of, okay, I need to be picked up and held. I need to be given a bottle or a breastfeeding session at that point. So that was a pretty big one. And the last one under the social and emotional category is tries to look at parent. And that kind of goes back to the first one, when they recognize that you're the parent. But the main thing that you're looking for is, are they trying to look at you? So some things I did would just move my head around. If I came into the room and I knew she was laying on her back, I would kind of come near her, maybe talk a little bit to see if she would try to move her eyes. At first, they're not going to have really good head control, but around 2, they start to be able to lift their heads up a good bit. So that is one sign where you'll know if they are able to turn their head a little bit and look at you whenever they recognize your voice or your presence. So that's the social and emotional category. Not a whole lot of social there, more of an emotional response from the baby. So the second grouping, language and communication. The first thing that they want you to check for is that your baby's able to coo, make like some googling sounds, like coo, coo. If I'm doing it right, who knows? But any type of sound so that you can hear if the baby's producing some type of guttural sound from their vocal cord, because that's very important for them to develop language later on. It's not too much to worry if they are kind of a little bit behind in this category. I do know that some of the language stuff gets pressed back if you do multiple languages in the house, because the child will learn 2 different sounds if you're doing 2 languages for the same object. So sometimes it kind of holds it back. But at this point, you're only listening for cooing sounds, so you should be okay. And it kind of ties in with the first category here. The second one is turning the head towards sounds. So you're probably going to have a bunch of musical toys. So what I would do was I would kind of stand off to the side so she couldn't see me, maybe behind her, set off a toy to see if she would look to see which direction it was coming from. I did this for peace of mind on my end to make sure that she was able to hear and figure out where the sound was coming from. And I wanted to make sure both sides, so I never did it directly in front of her. I would do it off to the side, maybe above or below, to see if she was able to pick up sounds. And I also used it to gauge what she was interested in. A lot of musical instruments we had. Like we had a kid guitar, a kid keyboard, drums. She was a big fan of drums. So I'd play the sounds of drums, and we had a little drum kit that we got for $5 from Five Below. And so that was interesting to see that she enjoyed that sound. So that's what I did to make sure that she was able to track and communicate for the first 2, social and the communication language categories. And those categories at this age are pretty closely related. Now for the third category, cognitive. This is where you want to check. The first one they have is your baby able to pay attention to faces. And that's kind of hard to judge. She should be able to know, like, if your child's hungry, it should know that it gets food. And this is for a breastfeeding mother, that she gets food from the mother. So she should recognize that if she's hungry, and as a dad, I pick her up, she should still cry and want that emotional response where she wants the food, and know the difference between the two parents. Or if you're at a family function or friends come over, she should be able to recognize the parent, he or she. I say she because I have a daughter. The next one under this category is follow things with the eyes and recognize people at a distance. So that's another one. She would always know my voice and be able to see like where I was. She knew the spots. Like I have a computer chair where I do a lot of work at home. I was at grad school at the time. So she would know that she would look at the chair to see if I was in it. If someone else is in the chair, she would know. And you could tell based on her response that she expected me to be there. And that's what I used to guide that decision if she was doing that. The other thing I did was I would track toys in front of her face, like an airplane, kind of fly real slow to see if she would rotate her eyes and try to follow it. So that's another idea you can do. Take a toy, or even like your finger. The baby of this age probably wants like shiny things. So maybe like a spoon, something that they can follow with their eyes, and you move it back and forth, up and down, to make sure that they're able to track your movements. And the last one for this cognitive category is they want to know if your baby's able to get bored. And what that means is if you're letting the baby lay outside the room, is she going to cry for attention? And if something doesn't change. So normally you can do like music for a little bit. They'll get fed up with that. So you want to try to switch up the environments every so often. Not do too much, like overstimulate the baby, but they do want to go ahead and see some type of change. So because they'll get fussy, even at the non-movement stage for the child, even if it's going to be just changing positions, moving from a chair to the floor, to like a pillow, to the bassinet, to a crib, moving around, they will want to see that. And so that's it for the cognitive. At this stage, it's going to be your best judgment. So try different things to see if you can get a reaction. And the last category for the 2-month milestone is movement and physical development. Can your baby hold her head up and begin to like push up and try to like stay up if they're on their tummy? And this is very important. I talked about SIDS last time, and I'll probably dive into that after the developmental charts. But you want to see, are they able to lift their head and have some type of control to get a response from the parent to the kid, that they're able to move around a little bit. And this will start to build neck muscles, which are important. And there's only one other for this category, and that is to make smoother movements with arms and legs at first. The arms and legs aren't going to move very much. They're going to be kind of stiff and barely mobile. And now you should start to get some mobility, and with that, some muscle control. So they'll try to move real slow, but it'll be like a smooth movement as they try to like work their legs up. They might kick a little bit, do some arms, some motions, try to reach for things that you do, a parent, a bottle, anything like that. So that's it for the 2-month developmental chart. Pretty straightforward, not a lot. If you noticed as a parent going to the 2-month deadline, milestone, that it is a lot of parent control. Your baby can lay there. You have to kind of stimulate them a little bit, go through, they nap a lot. So it's pretty trying as a parent. Just try to be patient. That's a walkthrough of the 2-month chart. Hopefully that helps. And I'll be going through each of the charts recommended by the CDC on later podcasts. So feel free to jump around if you're already past this stage or another stage. Jump around at any point. And if you have any questions or can give feedback, anything you'd like to see, please let me know. And thank you for listening. You have been listening to Dad Strength with Richie Leahy.